Anu is trying to save herself from Goon. Tumse Tum Tak. Upcoming twist. 5 December 2025. Tumse Tum. The throne room of the Ascendancy was silent. 10,000 years of history watched from the walls, portraits of emperors, holographic records of great victories, crystals containing the memories of fallen heroes. All of it looked down upon Princess Valeth Sornkai as she knelt before her father's throne. She had never knelt before. Not once in her 347 years of life. Emperor Kael Sornkai sat upon the crystal throne, his ancient face showing no emotion. He was old even by Kathrani standards. Nearly 4,000 years had passed since his birth. His silver eyes, once sharp enough to read the thoughts of lesser beings, now looked upon his daughter with something she had never seen before. Disappointment. Do you understand what you have done? His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder in distant mountains. Valeth kept her head down. Her long silver hair, usually styled in elaborate patterns that took servants 3 hours to complete, now hung loose and tangled around her face. Her elegant robes were wrinkled. She had not slept in 2 days. I was trying to serve the Ascendancy, father, she said. The Vorthan delegation was weak. You saw an opportunity to increase your own power. The Emperor's words cut through her excuse like a blade through silk. You manipulated the summit. You planted false information. You turned a simple trade negotiation into a disaster that has cost us 3 colony worlds. Valeth wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that her plan had been perfect, that if the Vorthan ambassador had simply reacted the way she predicted, everything would have worked. But she had learned, in these past terrible days, that her predictions had been wrong, so very wrong. The Kathrani were masters of manipulation. For 12,000 years, they had guided the galaxy's politics from the shadows. Their psionic gifts allowed them to read emotions, plant suggestions, and see patterns that other species could not imagine. Valeth had been trained in these arts since childhood. She was supposed to be one of the best. But she had made a mistake that young Kathrani were warned against from birth. She had believed herself superior to everyone around her. She had assumed that lesser species would behave exactly as she expected. She had not planned for chaos. And chaos was exactly what had happened. 3 billion citizens of the Ascendancy are now without homes, the Emperor continued. The Vorthan Confederacy has allied with the merchant guilds against us. Our trade routes through the spiral arm are closed, all because my daughter decided that she knew better than 1,000 years of diplomatic tradition. Valeth closed her eyes. She could hear whispers from the nobles who lined the throne room walls. They were enjoying this. She had made many enemies over the centuries. Anyone with her ambition did. Now they watched her destruction with barely hidden pleasure. The council has demanded your execution, her father said. Her hearts, both of them, stopped for a moment. Death. They wanted her dead. However, the Emperor continued, I have convinced them that death would be too simple, too quick. You have shamed the Ascendancy through your pride. Therefore, you will learn humility. He gestured, and a servant approached carrying a small box. Inside lay Valeth's psionic amplifiers, the crystal implants that boosted her mental abilities to their full potential. Without them, she would be like a bird with clipped wings. Your amplifiers are removed, your titles are frozen, your access to the royal accounts is suspended. Each sentence was a blow, and you will be assigned a cultural rehabilitation attachment for 1 standard year. Valeth looked up, confused. Cultural rehabilitation was a punishment for minor nobles who had embarrassed their families, not for a princess of the blood. You will learn from another species, her father said. You will serve alongside them, follow their guidance, and discover the virtues that you clearly lack. Which species, father? Valeth asked, her voice barely a whisper. Perhaps the Valanthi, she thought. They were nearly equals to the Kathrani in sophistication. Or the Mendari, whose philosophical traditions were respected throughout the galaxy. The Emperor's answer destroyed her. Humans. The whispers in the throne room became gasps. Valeth felt the blood drain from her face. Humans. The newcomers. The short-lived chaos makers who had stumbled into the galactic community barely 2 centuries ago. They lived for less than 100 years. They had no psionic abilities. They were considered barely civilized by most Kethrani standards, useful for manual labor and military service, perhaps, but certainly not for teaching a princess of the ascendancy. "Father, please," Valeth said, abandoning all pride. The humans are exactly what you need," the Emperor interrupted. "They are everything you are not. They are humble, they are adaptable. They understand that the universe does not bend to their will." He paused. "Perhaps a year among them will teach you what 3 centuries among us clearly failed to accomplish." Commander Marcus Webb arrived at the Ascendancy capital 3 weeks later. Valeth watched his shuttle land from her window in the diminished quarters she had been assigned, rooms that would have been considered luxurious by most species, but were a prison cell compared to her former palace. The human who stepped off the shuttle was not what she expected. She had imagined someone young and foolish, easy to manipulate, even without her amplifiers. Instead, she saw a man who appeared to be in his middle years by human standards, perhaps 40 or 45. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples. His face was weathered, marked with small scars that spoke of violence survived. He moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned that wasted movement could mean death, but it was his eyes that disturbed her most. They were calm, patient. And when they looked up toward her window, somehow knowing exactly where she stood watching, they held absolutely no fear. He smiled slightly, as if greeting a child throwing a tantrum. Valeth felt something she had rarely experienced in her long life. The uncomfortable sensation of being measured and found wanting. The human turned away and walked toward the palace entrance, where her father's servants waited to receive him. That night, Valeth reviewed what little information the Ascendancy had on Commander Marcus Webb, former soldier in Earth's Frontier Corps, veteran of 3 colonial conflicts, decorated for bravery multiple times. Currently serving as a diplomatic specialist, the human term for someone who solved problems that could not be solved through normal channels. His file noted that he had requested this assignment personally. Why would a human volunteer to babysit a disgraced Kethrani princess? The question bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Their first meeting was a disaster. Valeth arrived late, a deliberate insult. She wore her simplest robes, but they still cost more than most humans earned in a year. She spoke to him in the most formal Kethrani dialect, knowing he would struggle to understand it. Marcus Webb simply waited until she finished her elaborate greeting, then replied in perfect common galactic. "Good morning, Your Highness. I hope you slept well. We have a lot of work to do." "I do not take orders from humans," Valeth said coldly. "That's fine," Marcus replied. "I don't give orders. I give suggestions, very strong suggestions." He smiled again, that same calm, patient smile that made her want to scream. "Your father has assigned me as your advisor. My job is to help you become the person you're capable of being. Your job is to let me help. And if I refuse, then we spend a year being unpleasant to each other. And at the end of it, you're exactly where you started, stripped of power, respected by no one, with enemies waiting to destroy you." He shrugged. "Your choice, Your Highness." Valeth stared at him. No one had spoken to her like this in centuries. Servants trembled before her. Nobles plotted against her, but always with careful respect. Even her father, in his disappointment, maintained the formal distance of royalty. This human spoke to her like she was just another person. She hated it. "Our first assignment begins tomorrow," Marcus continued, ignoring her silence. "A simple diplomatic mission to the fringe colonies. You'll observe how humans conduct negotiations. Try to learn something." He turned and walked away without waiting for her response. Valeth stood alone in the meeting room, her hands trembling with rage. 1 year. She had to endure this creature for 1 year. She would survive it. She would complete her punishment, and then she would return to power and make everyone who had witnessed her humiliation pay. That was the plan, anyway. She had no idea that the universe was about to teach her how worthless plans could be. The transport ship Herald of Dawn was a mid-sized vessel designed for diplomatic missions, comfortable but not luxurious. Valeth had her own cabin, but it was barely larger than a closet by her standards. Marcus had a similar cabin next door, For the 3-day journey to the fringe colonies, they would be forced into close proximity. On the second night, alarms shattered the silence. Valeth stumbled from her bed as the ship shook violently. Emergency lights painted everything in red. Through the walls, she could hear shouting, running footsteps, and something else, the distinctive sound of weapons fire. Her door slid open. Marcus stood in the corridor, fully dressed despite the late hour. He held a weapon in his hand, a compact firearm that looked well used. "Pirates," he said simply. "They've disabled our engines. Boarding parties are coming through the lower decks. Pirates." Valeth felt fear, real fear, not the political anxiety she was accustomed to. Without her psionic amplifiers, she was nearly helpless. She couldn't read minds. She couldn't plant suggestions. She was just a woman with no combat training facing armed criminals. "What do we do?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Marcus looked at her. In the red emergency light, his weathered face was calm. His eyes held no panic. "How many hostiles can you sense?" he asked. "Even without your amplifiers, you should be able to feel something." She closed her eyes, concentrated. Her diminished abilities showed her flickering images, emotions, more than thoughts. Fear from the crew, cruel excitement from the attackers. 20, she said. "Perhaps 25. They are excited. They think this will be easy." Marcus nodded, as if she had just given him useful tactical information instead of vague impressions. "Good," he said. "Then we have the advantage." "Advantage?" Valeth stared at him. "There are 2 of us and 20 of them. We have no soldiers, no defenses." "No, we have surprise," Marcus interrupted. "They're expecting frightened diplomats. They're not expecting resistance." He checked his weapon. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say, and whatever happens, don't stop moving." He moved down the corridor before she could respond. Valeth followed because she had no other choice. Behind her, she heard the pirates breaking through the upper airlock. The hunt had begun. The corridor was dark except for the red emergency lights. Valeth followed Marcus through the ship, her hearts pounding so hard she could hear them in her ears. Behind them, the sounds of the pirates grew closer. Boots on metal floors. Rough voices shouting commands. Marcus moved like a shadow. He checked every corner before turning. He listened at every door before passing. His weapon was always ready. But he did not fire wildly, like the criminals behind them. "Where are we going?" Valeth whispered. "Escape pods," Marcus replied without looking back. "Deck 7. We cannot save this ship, but we can save ourselves. The crew are already captured or hiding. We cannot help them by getting caught ourselves." It was cold logic. Valeth understood cold logic. She had used it herself many times in political games. But hearing it from this human, in this moment of danger, felt different. He was not being cruel, he was being practical. They reached a junction where 2 corridors met. Marcus held up his hand, signaling her to stop. She pressed herself against the wall. Barely breathing, footsteps approached from the left corridor. 2 pirates, maybe 3. Marcus moved so fast that Valeth almost missed it. He stepped around the corner, fired twice, and stepped back. 2 bodies hit the floor. The 3rd pirate shouted in alarm, then went silent as Marcus fired again. "Move," Marcus said. Now, they ran. The escape pod was small, designed for 4 people but comfortable for none. Marcus sealed the door behind them and began the launch sequence. Through the tiny window, Valeth could see the Herald of Dawn surrounded by 3 pirate vessels. "They will see us launch," she said. "They will follow." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But escape pods are small targets, and we are heading toward the Kareth moon. Lots of places to hide there." The pod launched with a violent shudder. Valeth was thrown against her seat as they rocketed away from the captured ship. Behind them, she saw flashes of light weapons fire, but none of it came close to their tiny vessel. "They are not following," she said, surprised. "They got what they wanted," Marcus said. "A diplomatic ship full of valuable cargo and important hostages. One escape pod with a disgraced princess and a human advisor is not worth their time." His words stung, but Valeth could not argue with them. She was no longer valuable. That truth had never felt more real than in this moment. The pod flew through the darkness of space toward a small gray moon that grew larger in their window. Valeth watched it approach and felt nothing but exhaustion. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we survive," Marcus said. "The pod has an emergency beacon. Help will come eventually. But the Kareth moon is uninhabited and harsh. It might take days before rescue arrives. Days. On an empty moon. With only this human for company." Valeth closed her eyes and wondered what she had done to deserve this. The crash landing was rough. The pod's systems were not designed for gentle arrivals, they were designed for survival. They hit the moon's surface hard, bounced twice, and finally came to rest in a shallow crater surrounded by gray rocks and thin ice. Marcus was already moving before Valeth could catch her breath. He opened storage compartments and began pulling out supplies: food packets, water containers, thermal blankets, a small heating unit. "We need shelter," he said. "The pod's hull will protect us from the worst of the cold. But we should reinforce it. Help me with these blankets." Valeth stared at him. "I am a princess of the Ascendancy. I do not." "Your Highness!" Marcus turned to look at her. His voice was calm, but his eyes were serious. "Out there, the temperature will drop to 60 below zero when the sun sets. We have approximately 4 hours of daylight left. You can help me build shelter, or you can freeze to death while explaining your royal status to the rocks. Your choice." She wanted to argue. She wanted to remind him who she was, who she had been. But the cold was already seeping through the pod's walls, and she could see her breath forming clouds in the air. She grabbed a blanket and began working. By nightfall, they had created a small survival camp inside the pod. The heating unit provided warmth in a limited area. The thermal blankets covered the walls, keeping the heat inside. Marcus had rationed their food and water enough for 5 days if they were careful. Valeth sat wrapped in blankets, eating a nutrition bar that tasted like cardboard. Her fingers ached from the cold. She had never been so uncomfortable in her entire life. Marcus sat across from her, checking the emergency beacon. His movements were steady, methodical. He did not complain. He did not show fear. He simply worked through each problem as it appeared. "How do you do it?" Valeth asked suddenly. Marcus looked up. "Do what?" "Stay calm. We nearly died. We are stranded on an empty moon. Our situation is desperate." She shook her head. "Yet you act as if this is just another day." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged. "For humans, every day is borrowed time. We do not live for centuries like your people. We get maybe 80 years if we are lucky. 90 if we are very lucky." He smiled slightly. "I am 42. That means I have maybe 30 or 40 years left. In that time, I want to do things that matter. Panicking does not help me do that." Valeth considered this. 30 years. She had spent longer than that learning to play a musical instrument, a minor hobby that she had eventually abandoned out of boredom. This man's entire remaining life was shorter than her entertainment. "That is sad," she said finally. "Is it?" Marcus leaned back against the wall. "I do not think so. Having limited time means every moment matters. Every choice has weight. Every day is an opportunity to make a difference." He looked at her. "How old are you, Your Highness?" 347 years. "And in all that time, what have you accomplished that truly mattered?" The question hit Valeth like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to respond to list her achievements. Her political victories. Her rise through the court, but the words died in her throat. What had she accomplished? She had gained power. She had made alliances. She had destroyed rivals. But what had she actually built? What had she created that would last beyond her own ambition? Nothing. She had built nothing. "I have served the Ascendancy," she said weakly. "You have served yourself," Marcus corrected gently. "That is why you are here. That is why your father sent you to me. He hopes that learning from humans will teach you something that 3 centuries among your own people could not." "And what is that?" Marcus smiled. That a life measured in centuries is worthless if it is spent only on yourself. And that a life measured in decades can change the entire galaxy if it is spent on something greater. On the second night, predators came. They were called ice stalkers, native creatures of the Kareth moon that had survived on this frozen rock for millions of years. They were the size of large wolves, with white fur and black eyes and teeth designed for tearing through flesh. Vayleth sensed them before she heard them. Even without her amplifiers, she could feel their hunger pressing against her mind, cold and ancient and patient. "Marcus," she whispered. "Something is coming." He was awake instantly, his weapon in his hand. "How many?" She concentrated. The hunger came from multiple directions. 4. Maybe 5. "They are surrounding us." Marcus nodded. He moved to the pod's door and looked through the small window. Outside, Vayleth could see shapes moving in the darkness, white against the gray ice. "They cannot get through the hull," Marcus said. "But they will wait. They are patient hunters. So we wait too?" "No." Marcus checked his weapon. "Waiting is what they expect. Prey waits. Prey hides. That is what their instincts understand." He looked at her. "Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the best defense is to attack first. To be so aggressive that predators decide you are not worth the trouble." He opened the door. Cold air rushed in like a knife. Vayleth saw the ice stalkers freeze in surprise. They had not expected their prey to emerge. Marcus fired. Once. Twice. 3 times. One stalker fell. Another yelped and ran, wounded. The others scattered, their hunting formation broken. But one remained. The largest of them, the pack leader, charged straight at Marcus with terrible speed. Marcus did not run. He stood his ground and fired again, but the stalker was too fast. It hit him hard, knocking the weapon from his hand. They fell together, rolling across the ice. Vayleth screamed. She did not remember leaving the pod. She did not remember grabbing the heating unit's metal stand. She only remembered swinging it with all her strength at the creature that was trying to kill the only person who stood between her and death. The blow connected. The stalker howled and released Marcus, turning toward this new threat. Vayleth stood before it, trembling, holding her improvised weapon. The creature's black eyes studied her. She could feel its mind confused now, uncertain. This was not how prey behaved. Marcus rose behind the stalker. Blood ran from a gash across his ribs, staining his shirt dark red. But his hand had found his weapon again. He fired once. The stalker fell and did not rise. Silence returned to the frozen moon. Inside the pod, Vayleth cleaned Marcus's wound with shaking hands. The gash was deep, but not fatal. He guided her through the treatment, how to clean it, how to seal it with the medical supplies from the emergency kit. "You saved my life," he said. "You were protecting me," Vayleth replied. "I could not let you die." "That is not what I expected from a princess who told me she does not take orders from humans." Vayleth paused. Her hands were covered in his blood, red like her own, despite coming from a creature she had considered barely worthy of notice. "I did not expect it either," she admitted. Marcus smiled despite his pain. "Perhaps there is hope for you yet, Your Highness." She wanted to respond with something cold, something to restore her dignity. But instead, she found herself asking a question that had been forming since he first arrived. "Why did you volunteer for this assignment? Why would a human choose to spend a year with a disgraced Kethrani princess?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired but honest. "Because everyone deserves the chance to become better than their worst moment, even princesses." He closed his eyes. "Especially princesses. You have the power to do great good or great harm. I wanted to help you choose good." Vayleth sat in silence, watching this strange human sleep. Outside, the frozen wind howled against their tiny shelter. For the first time in 300 years, she wondered if perhaps she had been wrong about everything. Rescue came on the 4th day. A patrol ship from the Ascendancy found their emergency beacon and pulled them off the frozen moon. Vayleth had never been so grateful to see the golden hulls of her people's vessels. The warmth of the ship felt like heaven after 4 days of ice and cold nutrition bars. Medical officers treated Marcus's wound properly. They looked at Valeth with curious eyes, wondering why a princess was stranded on a barren moon with a human. Both of them dirty and exhausted, and somehow alive. Valeth did not explain. She was too tired for politics. But Marcus was not tired. Even as doctors worked on his ribs, he was asking questions. Who had known about their transport route? Who had access to their schedule? How had pirates found a diplomatic ship in the middle of protected space? It happens sometimes, the patrol captain said with a shrug. Pirates have informants everywhere. Not like this, Marcus replied. Those pirates knew exactly when and where we would be. They disabled our engines with their first shot, a perfect hit that requires advanced knowledge of our ship's design. He shook his head. This was not random, this was planned. Valeth listened from her medical bed. She had been so focused on survival that she had not considered the larger picture. But now, Marcus's words sparked something in her mind. The pirates had not seemed interested in her. A princess of the ascendancy, even a disgraced one, would normally be a valuable hostage. Yet they had let her escape without pursuit, unless capturing her was never the goal, unless the goal was killing her. Back on the ascendancy capital world, Valeth expected to return to her diminished quarters and continue her punishment in peace. Instead, Marcus insisted they investigate. Someone tried to kill you, he said as they walked through the gleaming corridors of the administrative district. Do you not want to know who? The court will investigate, Valeth replied. These matters are handled through proper channels. Proper channels take time. Whoever planned this attack will use that time to cover their tracks. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. Your Highness, I have been doing this work for 20 years. I know what a targeted killing looks like. And I know that if we wait for bureaucracy, we will never find the truth. Valeth studied his face. The wound on his ribs was healing, but he moved carefully, protecting the injury. He had nearly died for her. He had no reason to push this investigation except his own sense of justice, or perhaps something else. Why do you care? She asked. Your assignment is to teach me humility, not to solve mysteries. Marcus smiled slightly. Teaching you to fight for truth instead of accepting comfortable lies seems like a good lesson in humility. She could not argue with that. Marcus had contacts that Valeth had never imagined existed. Over the following weeks, he introduced her to a hidden world beneath the Ascendancy's polished surface. Human traders who moved through Kathrani space, carrying goods and information, retired soldiers who had served alongside aliens in distant wars, merchants who knew secrets that nobles paid fortunes to keep hidden. These were not the kind of people Valeth had ever noticed. They were invisible to her servants, workers, foreigners who existed in the background of her privileged life. But they noticed everything. Your people see everyone below a certain status as furniture, Marcus explained as they sat in a small trading post on the station's lower levels. The air smelled of strange spices and engine oil. Around them, humans and aliens of a dozen species conducted business in low voices. Furniture does not talk, but it listens. And it remembers. A human woman approached their table. She was older than Marcus, with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too much. She sat down without greeting and slid a data chip across the table. The pirates who attacked your ship were hired, she said. Payment came through 7 different shell companies, but I traced it back to its source. She looked at Valeth. Someone in the Kathrani noble houses wants you dead, princess, and they paid a lot of money to make it happen. Valeth took the data chip with trembling fingers. Who? The woman shrugged. The trail goes cold at the Sornkai family accounts. Beyond that, I cannot say. But whoever it is, they have access to royal funds and royal information. That narrows the list considerably. After the woman left, Valeth sat in silence. Royal funds, royal information. That meant someone in her own family, or very close to it, had ordered her death. Your cousin, Marcus said quietly. Lord Thyron. He has been positioning himself as your father's heir since your disgrace. Your survival threatens his ambitions. Thyron. Of course, he had always hated her, always resented her closeness to the throne. They had been rivals since childhood, competing for their grandfather's approval, then their father's favor. When Valeth had risen to prominence, Thyron had retreated into the shadows. But shadows were where conspiracies grew. Gathering evidence against a lord of the ascendancy was not easy. Thyron was careful. His allies were powerful. Every time Valeth and Marcus found a thread of proof, it seemed to disappear. Witnesses changed their stories, documents were lost, officials suddenly became uncooperative. "We need something undeniable," Marcus said. "Something that Thyron cannot explain away or make disappear." They found it in the most unlikely place, the testimony of a servant. Her name was Lyra. She had worked in Thyron's household for 60 years. Invisible and unimportant. But she had seen things. She had heard conversations, and when Marcus approached her with respect instead of commands, she agreed to talk. "Lord Thyron meets with strange people," Lyra told them in a quiet corner of the servants' quarters. "Humans mostly, rough men with cold eyes. He gives them money and instructions. I heard him mention the princess once. He said she was a problem that would solve itself soon." "Would you testify to this?" Valeth asked. "Before the emperor and the court?" Lyra looked frightened. "Your Highness, I am nobody. Who would believe a servant against a lord?" "I would," Valeth said. The words surprised her. A month ago, she would never have considered a servant's word valuable. But her time with Marcus had changed something inside her. She had learned to see people who had always been invisible. Marcus nodded. "We need more voices like yours. Other servants, merchants, anyone who has seen Thyron's activities. If enough people speak together, even the court cannot ignore them." Over the following weeks, they gathered witnesses. Slowly, carefully, Marcus built a network of ordinary people willing to stand against a lord of the ascendancy. Traders who had been cheated, servants who had been mistreated, minor nobles who had been threatened. Alone, each voice was weak. Together, they became a chorus. When Valeth and Marcus finally brought their evidence to the emperor, they were blocked at every turn. Thyron's allies in the court refused to grant them an audience. Official investigators dismissed their claims as insufficient. Even Valeth's father, the emperor himself, seemed reluctant to act. "I cannot accuse a lord of the blood based on servant gossip," her father said when she finally managed to speak with him. "The evidence is not absolute. Father, he tried to kill me. Perhaps, or perhaps the pirates were simply pirates. Or perhaps someone else hired them and wants you to blame Thyron." The emperor shook his ancient head. "We must be certain. We must be careful. These accusations could tear the ascendancy apart." Careful. Always careful. Valeth saw her people's great weakness clearly now. Their long lives had made them slow. They had so much time that they never felt urgency. They could always wait another decade, another century, for the perfect moment. But the perfect moment never came. And while they waited, people like Thyron acted. After the audience, Marcus found her in the palace gardens, staring at nothing. "He will not help us," she said flatly. "My own father will not help." "Then we help ourselves," Marcus replied. "The Ascension Gala is in 3 weeks. Every noble in the ascendancy will attend, including Thyron." "What are you suggesting?" Marcus sat beside her on the stone bench. His eyes were calm but determined. "We expose him publicly, in front of everyone. We bring our witnesses, present our evidence, and force the court to see what they have been ignoring. That is," Valeth searched for words, "that is not how things are done." "No," Marcus agreed. "It is how humans do things. Fast, loud, direct." He looked at her. "Your people have forgotten that sometimes justice requires courage, not caution. Are you willing to remember?" Valeth thought about everything she had learned. About the servants who had risked their lives to help her. About the human who had nearly died protecting her. About the comfortable lies she had believed for 300 years. She thought about who she wanted to be when this was over. "Yes," she said, "I am willing." Marcus smiled. "Then let us plan a confrontation that the ascendancy will never forget." The Ascension Gala was the most important event in the Kathrani calendar. Once every decade, The greatest nobles of the ascendancy gathered in the first palace to celebrate their civilization's glory. Thousands of guests filled the crystalline halls, lords and ladies wearing clothes that cost more than entire planets, their psionic auras glowing with power and pride. Valeth had attended many galas before. She had always been a star at these events, beautiful, powerful, admired and feared in equal measure. Nobles had competed for her attention. Servants had trembled at her approach. Tonight was different. She entered the great hall as Marcus's cultural attachment, a polite term for servant. Her status was clear to everyone who looked at her. She wore simple robes instead of royal gowns. She had no psionic amplifiers glowing at her temples. She walked behind a human, instead of leading a procession of admirers. The whispers started immediately. Look at her, the fallen princess, serving a human. How shameful. I heard she cried when they took her amplifiers. Begged like a common criminal. Valeth heard every word. A month ago, they would have destroyed her. But she had spent weeks in the company of servants and traders, learning to see past the cruelty of privileged people. She had survived a frozen moon and hungry predators. She had watched a human nearly die to protect her. Whispers could not hurt her anymore. Marcus walked beside her, calm and steady. He wore a formal human uniform, simple black fabric with silver buttons. He looked plain compared to the elaborate Kethrani nobles. But Valeth noticed something interesting. People moved out of his way. They did not realize they were doing it. They stepped aside as he approached, creating a path through the crowd. Some ancient instinct recognized what the conscious mind ignored. This human was dangerous. This human was not prey. Are you ready? Marcus asked quietly. No, Valeth admitted. But I will do it anyway. That is the definition of courage, Your Highness. They had planned carefully for this night. Marcus had positioned their witnesses throughout the palace, servants who would normally be invisible, traders who had business reasons to attend, minor nobles who had suffered under Thyron's schemes. Each one carried a piece of evidence. Each one was ready to speak when the moment came. But first, they needed to reach Thyron. The Lord was surrounded by allies, powerful nobles who benefited from his rise and would suffer from his fall. They formed a protective circle around him, laughing and drinking, and pretending that the ascendancy would last forever. Thyron himself was tall and elegant, with the silver hair and pale eyes common to the royal bloodline. He looked like what he was, a prince in everything but title, waiting for his moment to claim the throne. When he saw Valeth approaching, his smile widened. "Cousin," he said loudly, so everyone nearby could hear. "How wonderful that you could attend. Tell me, is it difficult to find clothes without servants to dress you?" Laughter rippled through his circle of allies. Valeth did not react. She had prepared for this. She had practiced with Marcus, learning to control her emotions, to wait for the right moment. "Lord Thyron," she said calmly, "I must speak with you about a matter of importance." "Must you?" Thyron sipped his wine. "I cannot imagine what a disgraced princess and her human pet could possibly have to say that would interest me." More laughter. Marcus stood silent beside Valeth, his face revealing nothing. "It concerns the attack on my transport ship," Valeth continued. "The pirates who tried to kill me." Something flickered in Thyron's eyes. Just for a moment, a flash of caution quickly hidden. "Pirates attack ships every day." "What of it?" "These pirates were hired, paid from accounts connected to the royal family." Valeth raised her voice slightly, ensuring that nearby nobles could hear. "I have evidence that someone in this palace wanted me dead." The laughter stopped. People were listening now, their conversations fading into curious silence. Thyron's smile remained fixed on his face, but his eyes grew cold. "That is a serious accusation, cousin. I hope you have proof to support it." "I do." Valeth gestured, and Lyra stepped forward from the crowd of servants. Other witnesses followed, merchants, minor nobles, even a former guard from Thyron's household. "These people have seen things, heard things. They know the truth about your conspiracy." The hall grew silent. Thousands of eyes turned toward the confrontation. Even the emperor, seated on his crystal throne at the far end of the chamber, leaned forward with interest. Thyron's allies shifted uncomfortably. This was not how things were done in the ascendancy. Accusations were made privately, through proper channels, where they could be managed and controlled. Public confrontation was crude, uncivilized, human. You bring servants to accuse a lord of the blood? Thyron's voice dripped with contempt. Have you lost your mind entirely? Has living with humans destroyed whatever dignity you had left? I bring witnesses, Valeth replied. People who saw your meetings with criminals. People who heard you discuss my death. People who your money could not silence. She turned to address the watching crowd. Her voice carried through the crystal hall, amplified by the ancient acoustics. For 300 years, I believed that status determined worth. I believed that nobles were better than servants, that Kethrani were better than humans, that power made someone valuable. She paused. I was wrong. The silence was absolute. No one in living memory had heard a princess speak this way. I learned the truth from a human who had every reason to hate me. I treated him with contempt. I insulted his species, his lifespan, his very existence. And he responded by saving my life, by showing me that courage has nothing to do with power or status. She looked at Thyron. You have power, you have status, but you have no courage. You hide behind assassins and hired criminals. You destroy people from the shadows because you are afraid to face them openly. Thyron's composure finally cracked. Rage twisted his elegant features. You dare lecture me? You who failed so completely that your own father cast you out? You are nothing, Valeth. Less than nothing. Perhaps, Valeth agreed. But I am not a murderer. She nodded to Marcus. He produced a data crystal and held it up for everyone to see. This contains financial records, Marcus announced. Payment transfers from Lord Thyron's private accounts to known criminal organizations. Communication logs discussing the attack on the princess's transport. Names, dates, amounts. He smiled slightly. Humans are very good at following money trails. We have had much practice. Thyron's allies began stepping away from him. The protective circle dissolved as nobles calculated the political cost of association with a potential traitor. This is lies, Thyron snarled. Fabrications created by a disgraced princess and her alien servant. Then you will welcome an official investigation, Valeth said. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. I do not answer to investigations ordered by you. No, said a new voice. But you will answer to investigations ordered by me. The crowd parted. The emperor had risen from his throne and was walking toward them. His ancient face was unreadable. But his eyes, sharp despite his thousands of years, were fixed on Thyron. Father, Thyron said quickly, surely you do not believe these accusations. This evidence could easily be forged. Perhaps, the emperor said. That is why there will be an investigation. A thorough one. He looked at the witnesses gathered around Valeth. These people will be interviewed. The financial records will be examined. And if the evidence supports my daughter's claims. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Thyron's face went pale. For the first time, real fear showed in his eyes. Then fear transformed into desperate rage. Guards, Thyron shouted. Arrest these traitors. They are plotting against the throne. Men in Thyron's personal colors appeared from the edges of the hall. They were armed, which was forbidden at the gala. But Thyron had clearly prepared for trouble. 20 soldiers, maybe more. Pushing through the crowd toward Valeth, the nobles scattered, screaming. Chaos erupted in the crystal hall. Marcus stepped in front of Valeth, placing himself between her and the approaching guards. Your Highness, he said calmly. I believe this is where I earn my paycheck. The crystal hall erupted into chaos. Nobles ran in every direction, their elegant robes tangling as they fled from the armed guards. Servants dropped their trays and scattered. Screams echoed off the ancient walls as thousands of years of civilized tradition collapsed in an instant. Marcus did not run. He stood between Valeth and Thyron's soldiers like a wall of stone. His body was relaxed, his breathing steady. He had no weapon. Weapons were forbidden at the gala, but his eyes were calculating, measuring distances and angles. Stay behind me, he told Valeth. Move when I move. Do not freeze. The first guard reached them. He was young and fast, his blade already swinging toward Marcus's neck. Marcus stepped sideways, grabbed the guard's arm, and twisted. The blade clattered to the floor. The guard followed it a moment later, unconscious before he hit the ground. Two more guards attacked together. Marcus used the first one's momentum against him, throwing him into his companion. Both went down in a tangle of limbs. Valeth watched in amazement. She had seen Kethrani warriors fight elegant forms perfected over centuries, beautiful and deadly. This was nothing like that. Marcus fought like survival itself. Every movement had a purpose. No energy was wasted on style or elegance. He used everything around him. Tables became barriers, chairs became weapons. Even the fleeing nobles became obstacles that confused his enemies. A guard swung at him from behind. Marcus ducked, grabbed a serving tray from the floor, and slammed it into the man's face. Another guard tried to tackle him. Marcus stepped aside, let the man's charge carry him past, and struck him in the back of the neck. 5 guards were down, but more were coming. "We need to move," Marcus said. He was breathing harder now, sweat on his forehead. The wound on his ribs, still healing from the Ice Stalker attack, had opened again. Blood stained his formal uniform. Valeth felt something she had never experienced before. Not fear for herself, she had learned to manage that on the frozen moon. This was fear for someone else. Fear that this human who had taught her so much would die protecting her. She could not let that happen. Her psionic abilities were weak without her amplifiers, but they were not gone entirely. Valeth closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She could feel the emotions of everyone in the hall: terror from the nobles, rage from Thyron, focused determination from Marcus, and from the guards, confusion. They were soldiers following orders, not true believers in Thyron's cause. She pushed against that confusion, amplified it, made them doubt. 3 guards stumbled, their attacks losing coordination. Marcus used the opening to disable them with quick, efficient strikes. He glanced back at Valeth with surprise. "Helpful," he said. "I am learning," she replied. They moved through the chaos together. Marcus cleared the path with his fists and his tactical mind. Valeth supported him with whatever psionic interference she could manage. They made a strange team, a human warrior and a diminished princess, but somehow it worked. Thyron's voice cut through the noise. "Stop them. Kill them both. I will reward whoever brings me their heads." More guards appeared, cutting off their escape. Marcus counted them quickly, 8 soldiers blocking the main exit, with more approaching from behind. They were surrounded. "Well," Marcus said quietly, "this is unfortunate." Valeth looked at him. His face was pale from blood loss. His body was exhausted from fighting. But his eyes were still calm, still planning. "You could surrender," she said. "Tell them I forced you to help me. My father would protect you." Marcus laughed, a genuine laugh despite their desperate situation. "Your Highness, I have been in worse spots than this, and I never surrender." "Then what do we do?" "We hold the line," Marcus said, "and we trust that good people will do the right thing." The guards charged. Marcus met them like a force of nature. He was slower now, his movements less precise, but he refused to fall. Every time a blade came close, he found a way to deflect it. Every time a guard thought they had him, he slipped away and counterattacked. Valeth fought beside him. She had no combat training, but she had something else. 300 years of watching people, understanding how they moved and thought. She anticipated attacks and warned Marcus. She pushed against the guards' minds, creating moments of hesitation, but it was not enough. There were too many enemies. Marcus took a cut across his arm, then another across his back. He was slowing down, his human body reaching its limits. A guard broke through his defense and raised his blade for a killing strike. "No!" Valeth screamed. She threw herself forward, putting her body between Marcus and the blade. Time seemed to stop. Valeth waited for the pain, waited for death, but it did not come. Instead, a voice rang out across the hall, ancient and powerful, and absolutely commanding. Enough. The Emperor stood in the center of the chaos. His psionic aura blazed around him like silver fire. Every guard in the hall froze, their bodies locked in place by the force of his mind. "This ends now," the Emperor said. In the silence that followed, the truth became clear. The Emperor's personal guard, loyal only to him, emerged from hidden positions around the hall. They surrounded Thyron, whose face had gone white with terror. His conspiracy had failed. His guards were frozen. His allies had fled. He was alone. "Lord Thyron," the Emperor said, "you are charged with treason against the Ascendancy. You will face judgment." Thyron fell to his knees. "Uncle, please. I was only trying to serve our people." Valeth was weak. She would have destroyed everything. Valeth stood against assassins with nothing but her courage and a human ally. The Emperor interrupted. "You hid behind hired criminals and family money." His ancient eyes were cold. "I know which of you is weak." Guards dragged Thyron away. His screams echoed through the hall until they faded into silence. Afterward, the Emperor summoned Marcus to his throne. Valeth watched as the human walked forward, wounded, exhausted, his uniform torn and bloody. He moved slowly, but he moved with dignity. He bowed to the Emperor with respect, but not submission. "Commander Webb," the Emperor said, "you have served my daughter with extraordinary loyalty. You nearly died protecting her. The Ascendancy owes you a debt." Marcus inclined his head. "I was doing my job, Your Majesty. Nevertheless, a debt exists. Name your reward. Wealth? Titles? We have treatments that could extend your lifespan, make you live as long as our own people." Valeth held her breath. She had seen how brief human lives were. Surely Marcus would accept the gift of centuries, but Marcus shook his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty. But I have seen what living too long does to people. It makes them slow, careful. They forget why urgency matters." He smiled slightly. "I prefer to stay human." The Emperor studied him for a long moment. "Then what would you have?" "Expanded diplomatic rights for humanity. A formal alliance between our peoples. And permission to continue working with Princess Valeth if she will have me." The Emperor turned to Valeth. "Daughter, your punishment is complete. Your titles and status are restored. You may return to your former life if you wish." Valeth looked at Marcus, at the blood on his uniform, at the scars he carried from protecting her, at the calm patience in his eyes that had never wavered, not once, not even when she had given him every reason to abandon her. She thought about her former life, the politics, the scheming, the endless centuries of serving only herself. "I request assignment as humanity's liaison to the Ascendancy," she said. "I would continue working with Commander Webb." Her father raised an eyebrow. "You would choose to remain with these short-lived creatures?" Valeth smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "They taught me that a life's worth is not measured in years, Father. It is measured in what you do with the time you have." She looked at Marcus. "I have wasted enough of mine." Epilogue. Years later, historians would mark the Ascension Gala as the moment the galaxy began to change. The alliance between humanity and the Ascendancy opened doors that had been closed for thousands of years. Other species saw humans differently, not as chaos makers, but as catalysts, not as short-lived primitives, but as urgent reminders of what could be accomplished when every moment mattered. Princess Valeth Sornenkai became famous across the galaxy, not for her family name or her psionic powers, but for her choice to learn from those her people had dismissed. She served as humanity's greatest advocate in the Ascendancy, fighting for equality and dignity for all species. And Commander Marcus Webb served beside her for the rest of his days. He never accepted life extension treatments. He remained human until the end, urgent, determined, and brave. When he finally passed, at the age of 78, Valeth was holding his hand. She had lived for over 400 years by then. She would live for centuries more, but she would never forget the human who taught her what those centuries should mean. In diplomatic halls across known space, a saying took root. It was first whispered by Kathrani servants, who remembered a princess who learned to see them. "Never pity humans for their short lives. Pity those who must stand against them, for humans have no time for defeat. The end.